So we opened World Hemp Congress 216 with all my colleagues and friends from all around the world. We have in the line already Paul von HARTMANN. He will talk about climate change, as this is thematic of this year. And please, Paul, you are ready?
Yes, I am ready. Thank you, Majda.
Very welcome from California Ministry of Cannabis. Please open our Congress this year. Word is yours.
Thank you so much, Majda and friends. I am very honored to be opening the World Hemp Congress this year in 2016. And I am speaking with you live from California up near Mount Shasta. And I am essentially introducing information about cannabis and climate change that I think deserves to be considered. I learned about the relationship between cannabis and climate change in 2006 when I read an article in the Guardian News. And the article reported on the work that was being done in Sweden by climate scientists there who were studying the boreal forests and the atmospheric aerosols that are produced by those forests. And those aerosols were discovered to serve as protection for the Earth from the sun by reflecting the solar radiation, the UVB radiation, away from the Earth, and also serving as cloud condensation nuclei that form bright and persistent clouds. So these atmospheric aerosols, which are known as monoterpenes, are molecules that go up into the atmosphere. They are the fragrant molecules that we can smell with our noses. And these wonderful smells go up into the stratosphere and actually physically refract solar radiation away from the planet. Well, the boreal forests of the northern hemispheres produce these aerosols, but also the marine phytoplankton in the ocean also produce the same atmospheric monoterpenes that perform the same function. So between the boreal forests and the marine phytoplankton, quite a volume of terpenes have been produced historically by these organisms. Well, the climate scientists hadn't really figured this out until we'd already killed half of the boreal forests and about 40% of the marine phytoplankton that produce these atmospheric aerosols. And so consequently, there's about twice as much UVB radiation that is reaching the surface of the planet than was the case as recently as just 50 years ago. And so the increase in UVB radiation presents many, many problems to geochemical relationships in the environment that determine the quality of life on this planet. They also serve to produce a protection that nothing else produces. And so when I read the article in the Guardian News about the terpenes in the atmosphere, I realized that cannabis produces an exceptional, extraordinary volume of terpenes also. And it became obvious to me that cannabis was needed in order to replenish the terpenes that have been lost with the death of the boreal forests and the marine phytoplankton. Cannabis is the only crop that produces the volume of terpenes necessary to shield the earth from the sun in the time that we may have left to make a difference. and the effects of increased UVB radiation are very, very severe. And among the effects of what I call global broiling by UVB radiation are immune suppression, abnormal cell growth, increased disruption of the normal systems of the planet that have developed under conditions that have changed dramatically over a very short period of time. Genetic mutation is a result of increased UVB radiation, as well as the increased solubility of mercury, arsenic, and selenium compounds out of aqueous solutions. So UVB radiation has many effects on life at the surface of the planet, and none of them are good. Reduced crop harvests is a result of UVB radiation increase, as well as materials degeneration at an accelerated rate. So the increase in UVB radiation is something that really does need to be responsibly addressed. And if cannabis can replenish the atmosphere with the aerosols that are needed, then we need to start talking about basing our crop selection on the terpene production capabilities of the crops that we plant. Now, one of the interesting things about the atmospheric aerosols, the monoterpenes, is that they don't photodegrade in sunlight. They are rained from the atmosphere after serving as cloud condensation nuclei. And so the rain that falls on the earth that has the terpenes as the nuclei is a terpene enhanced rain. And the significance of this is that the terpenes are known to have antiviral, antifungal, and antibiotic properties that it just stands to reason play a role in purifying the hydrologic cycle, as well as shielding the planet from UVB radiation. The terpenes in the atmosphere also help to kill the viruses and the pathogens that are in the water and perform that environmental service in helping to purify the hydrologic cycle. Some of the photographs that I see coming up on the screen are different phases in my my development as a cannabis scholar. I've been involved with breeding the plant, growing the plant, working with the products of the plant to produce building materials, and just working to expand our appreciation of cannabis. I've been working for about 25 years in this field, and the benefits of the plant are so many that it's really impossible to name them all. And so when you look at the cumulative effect and the cumulative benefit of cannabis in our bodies and in healing the climate change that we're facing, it really can be said that cannabis is our functional interface with the natural order. I don't believe our species can exist on this planet without the benefits of the cannabis plant. And while that may sound like kind of an extreme, fanatical thing to say, consider that we are facing irreversible systemic collapse of our environment, of our economic system, and of the social order that depends on the health of the environment and the integrity of the systems that have been in balance for thousands of years. And just in the last century or so, we've disrespected nature to the point where we don't know how much longer the environment is going to maintain its balance. Certainly the increased temperatures of the planet and of the oceans, the death of all of the indicator species that indicate the systems that we depend on for our existence are in radical imbalance. We're seeing species extinction like we've never seen before in recorded history. And it is a matter of time before the systems no longer support each other, and the impact of all of the things that we've done to this planet add up to an unlivable future. And I happen to think that because cannabis is such an extraordinary crop and has the potential for mitigating the damage that we've done, it is critically important that we prioritize the end of cannabis prohibition so that we can use what we have to fix what needs to be fixed. The reality is, if we don't resolve climate change, then it really won't matter what other problems we do resolve. And unfortunately, the limiting factor in our success seems to be time, and whether or not we have enough time to plant all of the different areas of the planet that can be healed by the cannabis plant remains to be seen. But cannabis, we know, serves a function in healing our bodies on a cellular level, and nutritionally, it produces the best source of organic vegetable protein on Earth. And yet, at this point, we still haven't come to appreciate that the Earth itself has a need for the cannabis plant, in that the organisms that used to produce the oxygen and sequester the carbon and produce the atmospheric aerosols to protect the Earth from the sun, those organisms have been depleted and degraded considerably. 50% the boreal forests have been cut mostly to make paper. The phytoplankton in the seas are also severely depleted, and yet there's very little attention being directed in these areas, and that's the really concerning situation, is that there aren't enough people talking about cannabis and its relation to climate change. It serves to sequester carbon. It serves to lock up the carbon in durable materials, building materials. Hempcrete is a very, very important development in the cannabis industry that can help to sequester carbon, not just during the growing cycle of the plant, but also during the curing process of the hempcrete itself. It sequesters somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 pounds of carbon per cubic meter. So even building with hempcrete plays a role in the carbon sequestration that's necessary to reduce the temperatures on the planet. And because cannabis is a non-invasive pioneer crop, it's capable of expanding the arable base with an agricultural resource that can produce protein and complete nutrition at the same time that it's producing energy and fiber and a lot of other things that we need in order to wean ourselves from our addiction to fossil fuels and nuclear power, which is destroying the planet. So because cannabis is unique in its ability to produce complete nutrition and sustainable biofuels from the same harvest, it is exceptionally important that we recognize how vital it is for us to grow this crop to resolve our need for energy without inducing food insecurity. And that's the kind of the big deal about cannabis, is that it's the only crop that does that. And that fact has not really been fully appreciated and considered in the context of the environmental changes that we're witnessing. It is extremely important to identify cannabis as an essential crop, as a strategic resource, as it has been identified in 7 presidential executive orders in the United States. Cannabis has been identified as a strategic food resource in 7 presidential executive orders in this country. And it certainly is exceptional in its production of complete nutrition. It's the only crop that produces all of the essential fatty acids in proper proportion for long-term consumption. It also produces meaningful quantities of the essential amino acids and a lot of other essential nutrients that are just not available in meaningful quantities and proper proportion from other crops. So in particular, the edestin protein and the albumin protein that's contained in the cannabis seed is the foundation of our immune systems, which under the conditions of increasing UVB radiation and increased pollution are under increasing pressure from the toxicity of the environment. So it's especially important nowadays for people to be eating cannabis and to be taking advantage of the exceptional nutritional properties of the plant at the same time that we're also developing the Gaia therapeutic, the earth healing industries associated with use of the fiber and the chlorophyll or the cellulose contained in the stem. It's exceptional to talk about all of the different properties that the plant has that no other plant has. And it really begins to sound kind of extreme to start listing all of the things that cannabis does better than any other agricultural resource. Just for example, the bast fiber, the exterior fiber of the stem, is apparently the best material to use in the production of high-density carbon to make superconductors, essentially batteries, and electrical storage devices. And there are properties of the fiber itself that have been shown to be effective in dealing with MRSA, the MRSA, the methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus infection that is sickening 90,000 people in the United States with staph infections and killing about 17,000 people a year as a result of those infections. So, there are a lot of properties that cannabis offers to mankind that establish it as valuable beyond the rightful jurisdiction of any court. If cannabis is essential to our existence on this planet, and I truly believe that it is, particularly because of its effect on climate change and the short window of time, the very rapidly closing window of time that we have to have an effect on climate change, then we need to recognize cannabis not as an illegal plant, but as an essential plant. And we need to recognize that the forces that are trying to limit or overburden the industry and the agricultural practices of farming cannabis are attempting to control an industry that is beyond control. Prohibition has proved itself to be counterproductive to its own stated objectives, and so there should be no hesitation in ending prohibition of this plant and beginning the massive agricultural campaign that's needed in order to replenish the atmosphere with the terpenes and to recover balance in the atmosphere so that we can look forward to a livable future and not one that is characterized by systemic imbalance and eventually collapse. In 2014, the International Panel on Climate Change warned of cascading systems failures and nonlinear extinction level events. And these are things that are looming in our future. We don't know how much time we have to make a difference. And so if there's a strong message that needs to be communicated, it is that we can't wait to implement these solutions. The solutions require time to have an effect. And so I encourage people to read my book. It's available online from Amazon. And also there's a film on Vimeo by the same title, Cannabis versus Climate Change on Vimeo. Documents my career and features interviews with people who share their insights on the value of the plant and why it's so important for us to achieve the polar shift in values that will help everyone's children progress into a livable future. And really, you know, it remains to be seen whether our species is adaptable enough to recover from the great lie of 1937, where we were told that the THC is bad for the human body. Well, now we know that that's not true. And we know that it is in fact good for the human body for many reasons. And in many cases, it is the difference between life and death. Many people have been apparently cured by using cannabis to treat a number of ailments and illnesses. So there really is no reason not to implement these solutions, because what we're facing is so much more dangerous and, in fact, potentially extinctionistic, that if we don't recognize that we were given everything that we need by the Creator, whatever you like to call that energy. Some people call it God. I call it the great you name it, because whatever you want to call it is fine with me. But the fact is, cannabis was given to us by that force of nature, and the fact that we have not used it for the last 80 years in this country, in my country, has influenced cannabis policy all around the world. And it really has got to stop, because at some point there will be a point of no return, a tipping point that we can't recover from. And so I hope that people watching this broadcast and and listening to the other presenters at the World Hemp Congress will recognize that time is the limiting factor in the equation of our survival, and we have to implement these solutions quickly and on a massive scale if our children are to have a livable world in the future.
So thank you very much, Mr. von Hartmann. We are very proud on your speech, and bye-bye in United States.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Stay with us. Stay with us and see us. We are proud on your work. Thank you very much.